Welcome everyone. My name is Rosalie. Thank you all for joining. We're just waiting a couple seconds for a few more people to join us. Awesome. Well, I'll kick off. Thank you all for taking time to join today's session. I'm Rosalie. I'm the editor of Power Retail and I will be your moderator for today. It's lovely to have you all here. In this webinar, we are joined by Accertify, and we'll explore retail fraud in 2025, predictions and strategies for the Australian market. We have a great lineup of panelists in store for you today up on screen, but before I introduce them all, I have a quick bit of housekeeping. So we do encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar. Feel free to pop them in the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end of the session. If we don't get to them, then we'll get you in touch with the right people. Well, today we are joined by Luke Dinan, GM at Accertify. We've got Andrew Wolf, Loss Prevention Program Manager with Officeworks, and Megan Omani, Director of Security at The Iconic. It's fantastic to have you all here. In this expert-led webinar, we'll explore the key fraud trends shaping the Australian retail market in 2025 and how fraud prevention teams can stay ahead. From the evolving role of AI in fraud to the rise of refund abuse and fake accounts, our panel of fraud prevention experts and leading e-commerce retailers will break down what's next and how businesses can strike the right balance between fraud protection, payment acceptance, and customer experience, the all-important one. Well, that's enough from me. I'm actually going to hand it over to Luke now to discuss the state of retail fraud in Australia and why 2025 provides some new challenges for us. Luke.
Thanks, Rosalie, and thanks everyone for joining us for the next 45 minutes or so. We look forward to this conversation. It's going to be a fun one. Maybe just to set the scene, so Rosalie, I think you're going to share a slide now which kind of just gives us a sense as to what's happening in the e-commerce market as it relates to fraud in particular. So just some high-level stats, and indeed a number of you might be quite familiar with these. So as many of you will be aware, we have AusPayNet, which produces a bunch of reports on a quarterly and annual basis. They also produce the annual fraud report. In 2024, CMP fraud in Australia increased by a significant margin, roughly speaking, a bit over 30%, to about 785 million, 92% of which was relating to card not present fraud. And as we know, that relates specifically to many of the retailers that have online businesses here in Australia. The sobering stat too is that per $1,000 spent, 72 cents is related to fraud. So once again, not an insignificant number. No doubt we've all heard a lot about scams. So roughly speaking, last year, ScamWatch, as most of you will be aware, reported, roughly speaking, 2 billion. So that's a significant number. If you look at from a broad perspective, $100, every $10 of every $100 is considered to be fraudulent as part of that. There's a lot of reports that go around, and even the guidelines or the insights that I suppose we gather from our retail base, both here in Australia as around the world, is that there's a number of high-profile themes that continue to work through the system. So we've listed the top 5 there: refund and policy abuse, which is very topical at the moment. Interestingly, real-time payment fraud is another one. These are numbers that are reported by the Merchant Risk Council. Phishing, farming attacks, which I'll talk about just in a moment, and then look at card testing and first-party misuse. So these are kind of the top 5 fraud trends as reported by Merchant Risk Council, and I imagine a lot of these are somewhat familiar with yourselves. And then we should just counterbalance that, of course, with just the huge increase that e-commerce and online shopping has presented to the Australian population. So roughly speaking, last year, 2024, roughly speaking, 17 million people engaged in online shopping. And it's worth, roughly speaking, close to 69, 70 billion Australian dollars. Let's just take a look, though, how that has changed over the past few years. So there's a great, if you like, a graph here that you can see that compares online and offline, and these are in fact worldwide figures, but they specifically relate to the retail space. So as you hopefully were able to see there, 2021, roughly speaking, 84% of shopping was done inside store, with roughly speaking about 16% online. If we go 5 years Following that, 2025, those numbers are significantly increased. So we're talking about 78% of shopping done in store, but a significant, almost quarter, 22% that is now done online. So this is an emerging trend, which no doubt many of you will be very much aware of. And then you can see where the growth has come from, whether it be consumer electronics, apparel, beauty, personal care, and so forth. So these are the real sort of sectors of online retail, which is driving that growth. So that's really just the scene set up. I'm now going to we're going to walk through about 5 predictions, and myself, Andrew, and Megan, we're going to talk about these and hopefully have a bit of fun with them. We may agree, we may disagree. Who knows where we'll go? So stick with us over the course of the next 40 minutes, and hopefully it'll be a fun conversation for you. So first fraud prediction. So quite simply, fraudsters will increasingly use AI-driven tactics such as deepfake identities, AI-powered social engineering, and automated credential stuffing to commit e-commerce fraud at scale. So I suppose to my fellow panelists, Megan and Andrew, it'd be probably remiss of us not to start off with this as a topic because it is absolutely the buzzword. As we see this increasing tendency for sophisticated scams and obviously sophisticated tools that are out there, the generative AI, which no doubt is a term that everyone on this call will become increasingly aware of. And I suppose the aspect of that is that it's so convincing now. It's so compelling. It's so persuasive. It's free of spelling. It's free of punctuation errors. It's grammatically correct. It is really difficult to identify what is genuine and what isn't genuine. So really, when we sort of break open this part from a vendor perspective and how it relates to retail, we kind of break it down into 3 simple things. So we see obviously a continuing drive towards phishing, smishing, and vishing, and I imagine everyone is aware of that. Phishing being emails. We would have all had emails from Australian Post about package on hold scams and those sorts of things. And no doubt we've seen a significant increase. We continue to see significant increase of that particular attack over the past 12 months. Smishing, of course, is when it involves SMS tests, SMSs, and messaging. So once again, $500 gift cards text that we receive on our phones on a regular basis. They're looking for credential and PII data on the basis that we respond to those. And then we've got phishing, and this is probably one of the newer ones, just where it's trying to emulate us as people and using our faces, using our voices to take advantage of unsuspecting people. So we kind of see these as continuing to play out, and no doubt, I imagine, once again, with the retailers on this call, they're all very familiar. Let me move to the next one. This is the really interesting one where we've got this real uptick in deepfake and face swap and voice cloning. We sort of kind of put all of that together. There's an interesting article last year, 404 Media, which kind of talked about a certain website that does these really authentic AI generated licenses. And these are available around the world, including Australia. And they create these incredibly realistic driver's license, which once again are used to perpetrate fraud, whether it's the signatures, the holograms, the image backgrounds, all those sorts of things. It's incredibly real. There's also a great story emanating from Hong Kong last year in terms of a well-known global engineering firm who one of their executives was called to a video conferencing call. He attended that thinking he was joining with his fellow executives, only for those executives to actually be deepfakes. They were AI generated. And what resulted after that, after a series of about a half a dozen transactions, roughly speaking, 40 million Australian dollars was fleeced from that organisation. So it kind of gives you a sense as to the increasing sophistication that cyber criminals are employing when it comes to AI. And the last one, just before I hand over to Andrew and Megan to get their perspectives, is this new sort of term, and you may have heard it, it's called agentic AI, okay, AGENTIC. And interestingly, this is all about how AI can be used to accomplish a task, let's say within a system, without having to specifically do it yourself. So it's an autonomous process. And it can go out there and do a whole bunch of things without you having to drive that yourself. It could be scheduling meetings with a group of people who don't share the same calendar. It could be in the retail sense, finding a hard to locate sneaker or trainer, if you like, through the holiday shopping period, and then actually executing that transaction. So this is a new form of AI, which is really important that all retailers need to be aware of. And there's many good things that can come of that, but increasingly we also see there's potentially malevolent aspects of that. So these Agentic AI could be automating a refund or a return for a particular product. It could be doing fake reviews, or doing some sort of manipulation for the seller. It could be automating chargeback fraud, that is, putting forward a first-party misuse claim. It could be creating new accounts. It could be accessing existing accounts. So once again, we're always keen to sort of identify the good bits of AI, but importantly, also highlight the areas of risks that retailers need to be aware of. So that's kind of how we see the world today in terms of AI. So I might just sort of now bring in my colleagues. So Megan, I might go across to you and just sort of get a sense as to how your organisation looks at AI within the retail space.
Yeah, look, it's a really topical um, point, as you mentioned earlier. AI is evolving at an unprecedented pace. There has been always AI and machine learning in the background of several tools for a while now, but I think it's becoming more accessible, more user friendly, both for our customers, the people who want to take advantage of it, and potentially also for us as retailers. And as you mentioned, Luke, there is areas where this is going to be taken advantage of by those bad actors, by those people who want to commit fraud of whatever it is to speed up their fraud processes. As a retailer, I think we need to focus in and look at the areas that we can also leverage it to combat it. Otherwise, we're running a race we can never catch up on. How do we take the similar technology and use it to our benefit to protect our good customers, to protect the accounts that we have, and to protect against those fraudsters that are trying to use AI to create accounts or perpetrate some sort of fraud via agentic AI, or even just perpetuating via better written emails to our customer service department or something like that.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's all pervasive. Andrew, obviously Officeworks been heavily focused on the business sector. Are you guys seeing signs of AI from a fraud perspective begin to play out in your business?
Yeah, for sure we do. As Megan mentioned, it's a constant evolution. It's changing every minute, every day, to try and assume that you're ready and prepared for it. A lot of businesses kidding themselves that they're not prepared and ready and feel as though that they've got this space locked away. It has to be evolutionary. It has to be dynamic, and I think. What's important is trying to understand the differentiation between the genuine customer and the disingenuous customer,
Mm.
and utilizing that customer data that you have, that you gather to to separate, or to identify the good customers and push uh, their custom through our portal as evenly and as smoothly as possible, and apply the right friction to the right spaces where we're not 100% sure of the genuine nature of some of these customers. I mean, and we try and utilise a whole heap of different avenues. Obviously, we've got online, but also store bricks and mortar fixturing as well. So we utilise all those avenues. We've got a field team out talking to customers all the time. So trying to piece all those elements together to build the customer profile is super important. And the last thing, just really quickly, is once you have all that data, trying to work out a priority listing of that data to identify where from top to bottom, where that assessment piece starts and finishes, to sort of have a whole ream of data ready to go and not prioritize it and not give it I guess, a risk profile or a ranking, is wasted data.
Yeah, it's interesting. We often kind of say, well, let's fight the bad aspects of AI with AI. We kind of see it in two ways, and both of you have kind of picked up on this theme in terms of how can we leverage AI to help retailers be more successful and to identify the truly bad stuff. We kind of see it in two parts. We see the micro stuff, all those behavioral signals that we typically get as part of the purchasing or the buying process. It's difficult for AI to replicate that, and so this is one aspect where certain device capture or pattern capture and recognition is really good. And then we have this other sense. If we look at micro being that sort of way in which we navigate a website or a shopping site, we then look at a macro version of that, which is talking about that historical data set that both retailers as well as potentially their service providers have. We, roughly speaking, have about 14 billion bits of data. And once again, it's difficult for AI to mimic that. It's difficult to build up a true repository of data which is truly reflective of genuine customers that are buying in the retail context. So that once again, it's not all negative. I think AI and pattern recognition, particularly the use of machine learning, plays a really important role there. So that's kind of how we see it. If there's no further comments, Megan and Andrew, we might move to the next prediction if you're okay with that. All right. Okay. So moving on. The next prediction we have here, Australian retailers will face a record surge in refund and returns abuse as fraudsters exploit generous return policies, false claims, and wardrobing scams. Now, no doubt this topic is near and dear to all of your hearts in terms of the increasing tendency for consumers to come back and return products, and particularly products, I should say, at an increasing level. I think Loop, that organisation that does a lot of sort of analysis in this area, did some great analysis across Australia, UK, and of course Australia over the past 12 months. Roughly speaking, close to 100% of retailers experience this. There's some interesting stats. I'm not sure if you're aware, but so the National Retailers Federation in the US, they sort of estimate that the value of returns in the United States alone is roughly speaking about 250 billion US dollars. So a significant part of that. But of that, they claim that roughly speaking about 13% are of a fraudulent form. So that, roughly speaking, if you do the quick maths on that, it's around about 25 billion US dollars. So it is a significant problem in the US. And if you compare that return rate, it's 18% compared to roughly speaking 10% with bricks and mortar retailers. So there's a significant divide between online returns and in-store returns. If we just then bring some of that stats down to the Australian retail space, so roughly speaking, the Australian retail space is worth about $60 to $70 billion a year. Using some of these same maths, we anticipate that the returns and refund challenge for retailers in Australia is probably costing north of $1 billion, north of $1 billion Australian dollars. So it's a significant amount. Once again, just sort of going back to that survey that Loop did last year, they claim or argue that roughly speaking $10.40 out of every $100 returned to retailers is of a fraudulent nature. So a significant thing. So roughly speaking 10%, which seems to marry that with the US experience. I suppose from a vendor perspective, what do we see? Many of our retailers, both here in Australia as well as overseas, what are the key themes? We see wardrobing, no doubt you'll be aware of that. The manipulation of shipping labels plays an important part. Returning different items, or we'll heard about, bricks in a package left at the door of the retailer and so forth, claiming that the item was never received. And then we also have this sense of not being so much fraudulent, but just this excessive rate of returns, which is causing a challenge for retailers. And it really does, then it creates what I often refer to as the retailer's dilemma. How do you manage that without upsetting the customer experience? Megan, I might once again go across to you here, because this is no doubt, you guys being a purely online business, you've got a lot of great fashion products. I imagine this is front and center for your organization, right?
It can't not be. It can't not be something that we want to investigate and focus on. And that's realistically, primarily, it's to protect our good customers. So we're not necessarily focusing on it always to stop the bad people. That's a byproduct. That's the benefit to everyone. We are a peer play. And so there's a lot of pressure in the return space to make sure that the policy is right, to make sure we're getting it right, because it offers our customers that sort of confidence when they purchase. They don't have the ability to come in and touch and feel our product. So we want to give them confidence that they're going to be able to return things. But as you said, entering that friction in the right space. How do we overlay the policy to make sure that we are protecting the good customers, giving them the experience that they need to have, while putting some barriers in place for some of these bad return activities? Both of you and Andrew touched on this with the last question, and a lot of what we have is the data. behind it. Like most of our customers, the vast majority of our customers are good returners, and they have always had good return behavior. We have no reason to worry about their behaviors, but we can use the data behind the scene to look at what makes a pattern that would
Mm,
indicate there may be someone who's got a pattern of behavior that might be wardrobing. There might be a pattern of behavior that might indicate some other, they're always saying that the parcel is not delivered, or they're always saying they've got the wrong thing. And that really
mm.
helps us to use the background information to put some controls in place to prevent that sort of bad behavior, while the rest of the customer journey is completely unaffected. So the good customers
Yeah.
don't feel, don't see, don't have to experience any of this friction.
Megan, are you guys applying that real time? I mean, is it post the actual claim event itself, or are you able to assess the data at the time of the claim being made and therefore make a decision, or do you kind of look at it post event?
I mean, obviously, for the first event, it has to be ex post
Yeah.
facto because we can't look at it. But as we look at it, we actually have a really close working relationship between our fulfillment center that receives returns, our customer service team that receives information coming through, and our fraud team. And we work in conjunction to sort of share information back and forth between our different teams. So and sometimes it might be slightly delayed, but every day I almost feel like we're speeding up the process to try and make things more real time, to try and help this become earlier up the chain, preventing the bad returns as the earliest possible point without impacting our good customers.
Yeah, it's interesting you just talk about data because I think we sort of we share a similar view. I mean, we often look at data elements, whether it be the email, whether it be the device fingerprint, the name, address, IP address, all that sort of stuff, which is potentially accompanying a claim return. And as you correctly point out, on the basis that you've got the capability to process that, to spot trends, spot patterns, whether a particular IP address is being used in many refund claims previously, whether the email address is tied to an IP address. Oftentimes we see multiple IP addresses tied to that single IP address. Not to mention then sort of profiling and sort of looking at the frequency with which users, because we often sort of say it isn't just about fraud, it's also about excessive returns, right? Just some people have a tendency just to really exploit the policies. And once again, having data at your fingertips kind of helps identify that in terms of reducing the risk moving forward. So once again, maybe Andrew, with your end, once again, looking at to some extent that business market, how do returns play out for your business?
Yeah, so as Megan mentioned too, that refunds are a necessary part of retail in order to make sure the genuine customer, has the right product and be able to differentiate again between the fraudster and the genuine person. We've had bricking events, we've had claims of non-receipt, all those elements. And admittedly, yes, the first one or two might slide through, but then generating that information, that history, will then help paint that picture for future transactions, for future validation. Also, what we've had too is, particularly if customers are presenting at stores, for example, that they're bringing either a fake receipt or a used receipt. So we've improved our point of sale
Mm,
as a result. So we're not able to refund the same product off the same receipt over and over again. From an online and an in-store perspective as well. Also, there are some of our business customers who have some of their staff are trying to refund back onto their own personal credit cards, for example. So we're trying to protect our customers as well from perhaps their own staff who might have left the business or have wanting to gain a little bit of extra money. So that's always been a challenge, and we try and work as closely as we can with those customers to at an account sort of level, to sort of give them a bit of a heads up, I guess, as to this sort of activity that goes on, and to try and work collaboratively to make it right.
I was reading just over the past week, you guys may have come across it, the Merchant Risk Council, they release their payments and fraud reports each year. 2025 has been released recently, and I'd be actually just interested in your perspective before we move on to the next prediction, how that now about 90% of merchants are using this concept of compelling evidence. You guys will be familiar with that. It's a scheme-based system which allows for increased data sets to be sent back up the chain as and when, chargebacks come through the system. And as we know, a lot of these chargebacks are probably what we refer to as first-party misuse. And once again, they go to the returns and refunds. And I was actually surprised to see now so many retailers using this compelling evidence. MasterCard and Visa now have their own schemes and rules associated with that, and does provide a much greater basket of data that can be used to refute or defend against these claims, many of which, as we know, relate to people just wanting to take advantage of policies, returns policies, and so on. Is Officeworks or The Iconic, do they see potential in, once again, the use of compelling evidence in this circumstance?
Maybe if I can sort of,
Yeah.
if I can jump in just quickly. Look, certainly, I think it's the old thing of if there's nothing to, if you haven't got a problem, there's nothing, you haven't got anything to hide, there's no problem. That if there's if you're a genuine customer, then the process will be nice and smooth and nice and easy. Where the hope would be that the disingenuous will get the friction to make it more challenging for them to actually get to their end goal, which is basically just to gain advantage.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, the use of data, regardless of whether it's a compelling evidence or internally, the use of data in the fraud space is really important because it really allows us to make good decisions for our customers and making sure we're continuing to evolve those decisions as the customer profile evolves and as the fraudsters' attempts evolve as well.
Great. Okay. Well, look, let's move on to prediction number 3, folks. So retailers will continue to see their customers face increased risk around account takeover attacks, synthetic account fraud driven by data breaches, credential stuffing, and automation. And so once again, this is another really topical item for retailers. We kind of see now the whole digital experience being a journey, whether you're creating an account for your preferred retailer, whether you're accessing that account, putting in a credit card number, perhaps changing the credit card, changing your email address, or various other aspects of it. And then, of course, you're moving through the payment cycle and so forth. But so often we probably hold the view that in many circumstances, you can actually prevent payment fraud just by about applying better risk decisioning at that sort of account level. I suppose in this context, from a vendor perspective, we see accounts, really anything of stored value, whether it's money, whether it's points, whether it's promotions, whether it's discounts, and indeed, does it contain data? I think that's another target that fraudsters typically see if they're able to access account. It isn't just about being able to fraudulently obtain the value that I just talked about, but increasingly it's about how they're able to access PII, which, as we know in the dark web, is a valued commodity. We know there's a significant amount of data that sits on the dark web, so there's nothing new. Retailers around Australia will be very much aware of that. Of course, feeding that is this constant stream of data breaches which occur around the world, which is unfortunate. I think, roughly speaking, last year, about 1.4 billion, it was estimated, were actually the victim of a data breach globally. So, a significant challenge. And obviously those of us, sometimes I also fall foul of this myself, common usernames and passwords, which if you get one set right, it can be deployed across a whole bunch of different accounts. And that way, information can be stolen, and as well as value. We sort of also see this concept of credential stuffing. We've been talking about this for a number of years, just the ease with which tools can be obtained and used by fraudsters to throw a huge amount of data at a particular website in order to crack that account. Recently we've seen fraudsters have kind of got onto that and recently changed tack. Now they're attacking the account creation page. They might be trying to set up thousands of new accounts. They've got 100,000 emails and then throwing them at these accounts. And oftentimes, as we know, if we're trying to set up a new account and it comes back with that email as already having been used, then we know it's a valid email, it's within that business, and then we'll try it from a password perspective. So there's some of the things that we see playing out in the account space. No doubt this concept, Megan, inside the Iconic around your account, I'd be interested just for you to sort of open and explore that a little bit more. What does that mean for your customers? And are you then looking at ways in which you can protect your customers and importantly your brand as and when, risks emerge in this space?
Well, yeah, and it's such an interesting question because my answer changes every time anyone asks me that question. And the reason for it isn't that I don't know, it's because we have to keep changing. We have to keep evolving what we do for our customer account security as the different attack tactics also evolve over time. Now, obviously, credential stuffing is prevalent for any business with any online login ability, whether it's a ability to purchase, a support portal, a points portal, or anything like that that you've mentioned. Now, at The Iconic, we really focus heavily on the customer journey throughout their login all the way to purchase and how do we secure that journey. And one of the things we've also wanted to do is bring that protection back to the customer as well. So we've increased our notifications to customers, and customers should be fairly used to these sorts of emails. Hey, did you log on from this IP address, or did you log on from this location or this device? Letting customers know that maybe there's something suspicious in the account. We've increased by having multi-factor authentication. Now that's optional if people want to turn it on, but in the background, we've got some adaptive multi-factor authentication to challenge where there is suspicious behavior that doesn't meet the customer's normal device. If they've purchased from Sydney and then 2 minutes later have logged on from Perth, that's probably
Mm,
not the same customer
mm,
doing that.
mm.
Behind the scenes, behind all of that, we monitor. We keep an eye on anything that might be spikes that are unusual patterns within it, whether it's lots of accounts being created from a particular IP address or particular email address tried over and over and over again so that we can apply preventative controls if we need to as quickly as possible in these spaces.
Great. Just to finish up this topic, Andrew, I'm going to come back. I'm going to go to you now just for a couple of minutes before we go on to the next prediction. But you guys see this little, well, you don't so much see it differently, but you've got a different challenge, right? So once again, recognizing the commercial business context of your business, you've got a lot of B2B trade inside Officeworks, right? And that of itself creates a similar, but in some ways a different challenge. Can you maybe comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, upfront credit is appealing to anybody, right? So, what we
Mm,
try and do is we try and validate the new accounts as deeply and as early as possible because we feel if we've approved a credit application and suddenly it's turned fraudulent, well, we need to tighten up our account assessment process, and we're constantly evolving that as well to see what other elements have that maybe we've missed or we need to apply more priority to, more risk profile to better assist. We've also had scenarios where our genuine customers have been mirrored as well, and somebody's taken advantage of that with some subtle differences. And unfortunately, one customer might get two accounts at the end of the month, one genuine one for their genuine purchases and another fake one that's attributed to them. And of course, that's certainly brand damaging from our point of view. So again, it's just a matter of that customer knowledge, that strong customer knowledge that we know of, to try and close that issue down. But getting that piece sorted in the first instance, getting that account assessment as tightly and as accurate
mm.
as we can is absolutely paramount in our business.
All right, thanks, Andrew and Megan, for those responses. Really interesting. We've just got two more predictions to go through, and we'll try to hopefully, Rosalie, have a few minutes up our sleeve for Q&A. So the next one, prediction number 4, 2025 retailers that overly tighten fraud controls risk to declining too many good customers, whilst those who focus solely on approvals risk more fraud losses. This is the dilemma. This is the challenge that all retailers are faced with, right? How to get that ideal, optimal balance between minimizing fraud and converting, payments conversion, as we typically call it. And obviously, when it comes to this concept of false declines, this is always the stuff that I imagine keeps fraud managers awake at night. Am I sort of denying legitimate customers their legitimate transactions? It's not an insignificant challenge here in the Australian market. CMSPI, which is a payments consulting business, roughly speaking, about a couple of years ago, I think, estimated the cost of false declines was in excess of about $3.5 billion alone. In Australia and the US, if you compare that with the US, it's somewhere closer to $80 billion. So it's a significant a significant challenge. Once again, I'm going to bring it back to yourselves, Andrew and Megan. Maybe Megan first. How do you guys see this challenge that all retailers have about just getting that right mix and trying to avoid as best as possible any false declines which come through the payments flow?
I mean, good customers are why we're all here, right? They are how we exist. We want to protect them, and we want to make sure they don't have that friction. You need to present a way of them purchasing that is seamless, that is, I mean, in our world, joyful. We want customers to really come back, not just because they found the perfect dress, the perfect pair of shoes, the perfect trousers, but because it was a really good experience. And putting that friction, putting those controls in place does add to it. Now, the
Mm,
machine learning in the background that we utilize can help to tighten the controls organically as we see it, but it is iterative, right? We have to continue to ask the question. Every single week, I sit down with my fraud team and go, why is this going up? Why is this going down? Are we introducing too much friction here? Are we introducing not
yeah.
enough friction here? And it is a constant give and take and a constant question that we are asking. It's not set and forget, and we have to evolve it. And it is actually on a weekly basis that we are talking about what levels of friction we are introducing to our customers and if it is right today, especially with the market changing and the sales periods or anything else going on around us.
Yeah. Andrew, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, very, very similar to Megan. I mean, we by default treat every customer as a genuine customer, as in a true customer that wants to trade with us until proven otherwise, I guess. So we want to make sure that the genuine customers do slide through, and until proven otherwise, then we apply the friction, because yeah, everybody fights for that customer base, and we're certainly not alone in that. But and yeah, we certainly manipulate or pivot some of the rule sets relevant to situations that comes, situations that we might be predicting, new ranges, new launches, certain sale dates. So some key opportunities where volume might be amplified, and of course, volume comes a level of further anonymity, which these people love. So we try and pivot some of those rule sets to perhaps maybe intercept or clarify some more than others in those key times. But as sort of Megan's mentioned as well, just keep that genuine, good, repeat customer flowing through seamlessly and repeatedly.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I imagine too, just before we go into the final prediction, we kind of also say it in similar terms, but we also say that there's got to be a range of KPIs which presents a true and correct picture of both your payments and your fraud experience, whether it's conversion rates that are above 99%, whether it's your fraud chargebacks rates, which are ideally sub 10%, if not below five basis, sorry, not 10%, 10 basis points, I should say. Reject rates, which is always an interesting one, because once again, goes back to this false declines there anywhere between 50 to 7 basis points. Ideally keeping that friction below. Once again, you talked about that as well, Megan, and ideally below 3%. So there's some of the things that we kind of track from a vendor perspective, and those that are kind of near that spectrum of performance, generally we sort of say they're best practice. Folks, we're up now on the last prediction. So I think we've got just a handful of minutes left, right, Rosalie? So we'll quickly look at this one. So retail fraud in 2025 must move beyond reactive fraud management to a proactive data-driven strategy that enables real-time decisioning. Once again, this goes to the heart of the challenge that fraud people pay in terms of keeping all parts of the organisation happy. You know, knocking out fraud and making sure the customer experience is optimised and that all payments are going through. We probably see it from 4 critical areas, and I'd be interested, Andrew and Megan, your perspectives here too. But we break it down into 4 simple things. More data equals better decisions. So whether it's user behavioural data, looking at the ways in which we navigate a website, whether it's device fingerprint, whether it's consortia data, that is all the historical or reputational data that were gathered through other transactions. In addition, of course, to the transaction basket, including SKU data. On top of that, then you're putting machine learning, which is really addressing, and Megan, I think you've said it on a few occasions, that ability to spot trends and patterns. And ML is by far the best thing or best means by which to do that. But equally, too, we hold dear to this concept of rules, because that then gives you that additional ability to fine tune specific objectives of the business, and these can change from one retailer to the next. And having that ability to get really surgical in the way that you execute your fraud strategy. And then the final bit really then is people. We feel that this idea that AI or ML can do your entire fraud or carry out your entire fraud program, we don't think it's realistic. Maybe it'll be there in 10 years, we just don't know. But certainly we feel that people are an essential element to the fraud practice of any retailer. Megan, maybe to yourself, just share your thoughts on those sorts of things that I've discussed.
I couldn't agree more that people are absolutely required in the fraud space. The human intelligence behind the data that we collect and the machine learning that we utilize is absolutely critical to the way that we look at our fraud strategy, both as a reactive piece, but also the proactive and the future thinking and how we want to move into the different areas of fraud. And you've touched a little bit, Luke, on the policy abuse fraud. And I think that this is a trend that's going to start to come more and more into retailers. It's not just your card not present fraud that's starting to happen. We have more and more different policy abuse that we see. I see spitting into this space as the market evolves and as the teams evolve. And that's just going to take another level of human intelligence, because it cannot be made in isolation. You have to consider all aspects of the business and how it fits in, and where do we want to apply the right pressure to make sure that, again, the good customers are protected and coming back, and that those people who wish to take advantage from a fraud perspective or a policy abuse perspective have some barriers to entry in those spaces.
Yeah, awesome. Andrew, you've got the final comment on this. Over to you.
Well, I like a good analogy, so I assume, I sort of take this AI piece to be a giant beast, and if you're not feeding the beast the right information, you're not going to get the right outcome. So having the right mix of people feeding the beast with industry data, with local business data, with chargeback information, with key aspects that maybe the AI might not have ingested through other means, you're not going to get the right decisions at an AI level. Hence, that's why it's super important to have people associated that are perhaps data scientists, and if they're not internal, you have to have a network with you to support that. But also some key people within the business to sort of lap up that information, lap up those ideas that, right, I might need to feed this into my fraud prevention tool to make a better decision going forward based on the information I've just been provided. So having somebody who's close to the close to the pulse of key business decisions going forward, then can hopefully then improve that improve those future results, and again slide those genuine customers through as easily as we can, and apply the relevant friction to those that perhaps are disingenuous.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Megan. Really appreciate your input there. I know we've endeavoured to chew off a significant number of very meaty topics. We're probably only knocked off the tip of the iceberg. But hopefully to the audience, there's some value there in terms of the insights that both Megan and Andrew have shared. So once again, many thanks for your input there. Rosalie, I might go back to you. I'm not sure whether we have time for questioning, but I'll let you take that on.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I mean, I have plenty of questions myself. I'm sure our chat does too. We won't have time to get to them today. If you in the chat do have questions for Megan or Andrew, you can get in touch with Power Retail and we'll pass them on. If you wanted to get in touch with Luke and the team at Accertify, we actually have a QR code up on screen there, and that'll take you directly to them. Look, that does bring us to the end of the session. Thank you so much for coming. Fantastic insights. I mean, we fit a day's worth of information into 45 minutes, so that was really brilliant, guys. Thank you for attending, and we'll catch you all in the next one.
Thanks, Rosalie. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Rosalie. Thanks, team.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all.